Dia Dick Gochdina, hello everyone, and thanks so much for all the support with my channel. I'm very grateful to each and every one of you. Today I'd like to speak about the rise in electricity costs in Ireland. Now, of course, this has been a major component of the cost of living disaster that's forcing more and more people into poverty. Many are struggling with extortionate costs in terms of their energy bills, and more have been forced into arrears. We're up to 400,000 people in arrears, and as well, we have about 30% of the population now in fuel poverty. That is deemed where you spend over 10% of your disposable income on your energy bills. And of course, it's a major driver of inflation. But the latest announcement from SSE Electricity have said that they will put up their prices by 9.5% on the 20th of October. Now, of course, this is the second increase that SSE Electricity has imposed on its customers this year. So it'll be essentially a 20% increase this year for over 450,000 households in Ireland that are customers of this company. Now, their CEO, Stephen Gallagher, said that increasing prices is the last resort. And he said this isn't something that they want to do to customers, but they're forced to do it. And they said, we know this news will be disappointing for customers. And as I said, he already said that increasing their prices is a last resort. Now, what's really interesting with SSE Electricity is that in the year to March of this year, they've generated an operating profit of over €108.5 million in Ireland. Now, across Britain, they've pulled in €2.75 billion euro in operating profit right across their constituent organisations right across Britain, and including the 108 million in Ireland. Now, they've made massive windfalls, massive profits from this, and as I've said, in Ireland we have amongst the highest electricity prices in Europe, 30% above the European average, which is an extra €355 above the European average. Now, of course, this is going to increase, and it's forcing, as I said, more and more people into arrears. Over 400,000 people in arrears in Ireland. And as I said, 30% of people in energy poverty as we now come in towards the winter in Ireland. Now, according to the Eurostat also, nearly 3,000 lives have been lost in Ireland due to fuel poverty annually. Now, the latest recorded figures haven't been published, but this is absolutely just outrageous. This is in a country that is exceptionally wealthy. And it's not only Ireland, it's across Europe, where 10% of the population of Europe is in fuel poverty. That's over 41 million people. We've seen major pressure here in Ireland on the grid in terms of it not being kept up to date or being maintained. And we've seen the explosion of data centres right across Ireland to fuel this AI revolution, according to Micheál Martin. And not to mention, we've also seen more and more increase in population, massive increase over the last number of years in terms of our population through the mass immigration agenda, which is putting pressure as well on the creaking infrastructure in Ireland. And at the same time now we have to deal with more and more power outages, and of course more and more storms in terms of Storm Elwyn recently. And the course of the time, one of the energy providers said they will be putting money, ESB said they will be putting extra money on these bills to pay for the storm damage during that period of time as well. But really what's behind all of this is the drive towards the privatisation of our electricity. Before privatisation in Ireland, we had the lowest prices in Europe. And at the time, they claimed that, well, privatisation will help because it increased competition and bring down prices. And they also said at the time that they will have a price cap, which you cannot charge more than the current rate. But of course, this is when the government, and of course with their EU masters and the neoliberal agenda through their directives in the European Union imposed on Ireland, opening up the liberalisation of the market, created a completely artificial energy market where state companies were broken up, and EirGrid was then charged with looking after the grid system and the transmission systems of the electricity. And also what's really important with this is that there was companies opened up the door to compete in terms of generation and the supply of power, and then they opened up an energy regulator. Isn't that interesting? To regulate the prices, wasn't it? And to look at them. But so much for looking at the extortion of prices. Well, there's absolutely super profits being made from this industry. And at the same time, we still pay capacity payments to avoid the risk of power outages. So much for the free market and this public service obligation that's imposed on many bills in terms of standing charges that people still pay when they're not using electricity or not too much electricity in Ireland. And if you look at the whole idea now with the Irish government, who are talking about people and telling people to switch and look around and shop around and all this type of nonsense, more and more money has been put into the sales and marketing of these companies. And at the same time, they've cut down on the technical workers and maintenance jobs in maintaining the necessary grid. But of course, now we've seen an explosion in prices across Ireland. Between 1994 and 2014, prices increased in Ireland by 267% compared to the European Union, where it was 40%. So nearly seven times greater than the European average in Ireland. Prices grew. And this is at the same time, as I said, that they opened up the door through the liberalisation of the market. And this was done through the European Union directives in 1996. It was done through the Electricity Regulation Act in 1999, which opened the door to the CRU. And we all know that they've created this artificial market that makes massive profits for the oligarchs, for those who are generating the power, profiting from it, and also those who are now selling the final user, the service providers in Ireland. So what's happening is a complete and utter con job. Another con job, and a sleight of hand as well, because in the Netherlands they've created an artificial market for the wholesale prices, where it's based on not the lowest price in a so-called auction, it's based on the highest price. So many of these providers go to the market with various forms of energy, whether it be renewables and so forth as well, but it's billed at the highest price, and then the differences then is given back to the governments of the countries, such as Ireland as well, are giving back the difference. And where does that go? It goes on towards those service providers, and to boost the profits of many of these shareholders who own shares in these energy companies, the providers and the generators also, to the big oligarchs who are making massive windfalls from the energy disaster. And notwithstanding, there is major calls again for more energy credits in Ireland. And this is just another subsidy and a more used to laden more public debt onto the people of Ireland to pay more public money, transfer right across into the hands of the oligarchs yet again, rather than addressing the crux of the issue, which essentially is that the market-led approach in electricity and energy and your basic needs has failed. And this is part of the agenda that's forcing more and more people over the edge, and yet at the same time transferring more of our public money into private hands, all implemented by the political establishment in Ireland. And you have much of the opposition in Ireland who are still calling for energy credits and still saying there should be more energy credits and put back in people's pockets, when it is essentially just a transfer of public money into private hands, rather than looking at the crux of the issue and bringing it back under public control. Even the ESB, when it was first thought of well over 100 years ago with the foundation of the Free State, and you saw the work they did in terms of the rural electrification scheme, went across on a not-for-profit basis. This was opened up in terms of giving shares to workers to open up to become a private company and to make money from this as a commercial enterprise. And that's what they've done through the European Union and of course through our politicians here in Ireland. And they always claim that it's against European rules, we can't do it. But they can rip up the rule book when it comes to weapons of war. The so-called fiscal space and the Fiscal Compact Treaty has all been ripped up in the context of opening up the door for the weapons of war They can do it, for instance, during the period of COVID, where in a drop of a hat they can transfer more public money upwards to make those billionaires and oligarchs richer while ordinary people suffer. So the energy crisis is a complete crisis for ordinary people. It's not a crisis for the very wealthy in society, much the same as the sanctions on Russian energy or what they're trying to claim. And we know we're getting at the same time, the oligarchs in Russia will benefit from this, the oligarchs in Europe benefit from it. And also what's happening in terms of the LNG that's been imported from the United States at 3 or 4 times the cost of the energy that we were getting previously. It's absolutely just madness to what's taking place, but it's a complete and utter con job, and we're all being taken for fools by the establishment. So please share my videos. Please speak out about what's really happening with the energy market. And also, thanks to everybody who subscribed to my channel and who has shared my videos as well. I'm very grateful for everybody who supported me through Buy Me a Coffee as well. We need to talk about these issues and expose them and challenge the status quo and the orthodoxy that prevails in the media about giving more energy credits rather than dealing with the underlying privatization and the artificial market that has been created to prop up those big oligarchs and enhance the profits of them. It's absolutely scandalous and it needs to be exposed. Take care. Slán go fóill.